and welcome to your final lecture for world history. Congratulations, you've made it to the end. Today we're going to be kind of talking about just kind of looking back, looking forward, about more modern issues today. So let's go ahead and let's dive in. So let's talk about how Christianity affected the world to really start off this chapter. So when Augustus Caesar died in 14 AD, there was no real Christians in the world, and the world was mostly pagan. Pagan temples were very much the norm. Many beliefs reigned about gods and their whims on the world. Less than 20 years after Augustus's death, a teacher arose amongst the Jewish populace and began spreading the word of Christ, calling his followers the salt of the earth. After this teacher's death and resurrection, he called for his followers to proclaim the good news that he had provided a way for the world to be reconciled with God. Many people accepted this message, no problem, but many people also felt threatened by this message. Emperor Nero, for example, is one of these people who felt threatened, persecuting Christians on a larger scale. Christianity itself does have lessons to share in regards to its impact on the world, and we'll be covering some of these in this lecture. Christianity changed the world's view on the value of children. Greek and Roman society didn't really value children in the past due to the common practice of infanticide. This was the case for unwanted children, handicapped children, or female children. These children were often abandoned, forced to fend to themselves, or becoming slaves if they were not put to death. Christianity had a different view of these children. Many believers rescued and reared children who had been abandoned in this fashion. But Christianity not only changed the value of children in society, but also changed the value of adults. In Roman society, gladiatorial combat was very much a commonplace event, participating in to-the-death battles against other people or other animals. Our shock of this practice shows the influence of Christianity on our society today. Slavery was also a very commonplace practice, both in the Roman Empire and into the West centuries later. Many Christians worked and led the fight to abolish slavery in both of these time periods. Prisoners had no rights in the ancient world and were often subjected to inhumane punishments or conditions. Christians helped push for better treatment of even those who had committed crimes. In the ancient world, a lot of prisoners didn't have any rights. If a prisoner received any food or care, friends or relatives had provided for him outside of that prison. Christians were one of the main groups who helped to push for the better treatment of these, always providing food or care for anybody, regardless of the crimes that they've committed. Christianity changed the value of women in society. In Jesus' day, women had few legal rights. They couldn't own property, their testimony could not be admitted in a court of law, they had no rights in a divorce, etc. Jesus treated women with respect and taught his followers to treat women as fellow human beings instead of property. For example, in India, the practice of sati, in which women were expected to throw themselves on their husband's funeral pyre, lessened when Christianity became a stronger influence in the country. Christianity also changed how we cared for the sick. In ancient times, the poor were often overlooked and the handicapped were often rejected in society. Medical care was very much something limited to the wealthy, given that no government programs existed that provided assistance for those who could not provide for themselves. Christianity influenced how people responded to those on a lower place in society, providing care for the sick, for the hungry, for those widowed, for those orphaned, and provided hospitality to strangers. During times of plague, when those who could do so usually fled from towns, some Christians were known to be people who stayed and cared for these victims. Christianity also changed how we interacted with education, work, and art. Christianity transformed education, creating the first modern universities. Many of the first modern universities were founded on the purpose of theological training. The scientific revolution was first based on God and the world being rational and orderly. and that we could potentially, because of that rational and orderly thing, we could find reason within the world itself. Christianity's belief in the worth of individuals influenced several areas of our work life, such as economic principles. And much of Renaissance and medieval art and architecture was created for the glory of God. Now, after Christ's ascension, Rome was a great world power, and Christianity was a tiny sect of peace-loving people who claimed allegiance to one God and faced persecution. After Rome fell, that little sect of people still existed and had grown massively in size. Now, the goal of Christians in the modern day should be the same as what those early followers were called to do: be the salt of the earth. Whenever it comes from lessons from world history, we have to consider a few things. The main issues themselves don't change. We've covered a lot of ground, but a lot of issues have been the same regardless of time or place. People have always wanted power, and people have always wanted to make a name for themselves. And people will do certain actions to attempt to make sure that power is given to them, that their name is remembered, that their name is remembered as history continues on. But the legacy that people leave changes based upon their actions, how they've used their talents, how they've used their resources, how they've used their opportunities. All of these things influence how we regard people in future examinations. There's always been conflict between good and evil. Both are real concepts, and both have been shown in people's actions. Former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher said, "I am in politics because of the struggle between good and evil. I believe in the end, good will triumph." We can see in history areas of great evil, but we can also see in history areas of great good. And it's important to keep in mind that both of these exist. History is not just the story of evil men. It is also the story of those who have risen up and have provided good for the people. Notable people are still fallible. People, events, and institutions are a mixture of good and bad. We like stories that have clear villains and heroes, but real life isn't as clear. There will always be good people who have done bad things, same as there will always be bad people who have done an act of good. Robert Browning, in his writings, actually says this very well. God is, they are. Man partially is and wholly hopes to be. To portray history in such a black and white, good, bad type of thinking is to deny yourself the history of actual people and to allow someone else to paint a picture of history for you. Challenge yourself to ask questions and interrogate the history in front of you. Look at a historical event from multiple perspectives to gain a sense of what is the true story. We will continue to seek answers from the world around us. We've explored things like religion, philosophy, science, reason, medicine, technology, education, government, and many, many more means to find the answers to our own existence and the existence of the world around us. The Bible is one such way for us to find answers about the world around us. But we will continue to seek answers for the world around us for as long as we continue on this earth. Good is real and good will triumph. Christians believe that the world is heading somewhere, that it's not just an endless cycle of reincarnation and repetition. Flawed as we are, humans have within them the capacity to choose what is right. And people have chosen to do what is right and noble, even at the cost of their own lives. The final thing to keep in mind is that much, much more has taken place in history than what can be covered in a single year. Many people have had an impact on their country, their community, and their family. You probably have family members yourself that have had an impact on some level on history. Trends and events that are historic have impacted many people, whether in one country or around the world. Sometimes this effect takes a long time to develop fully. But truly historical events are worth remembering in this generation and in the future. Because we can learn valuable lessons, be inspired to continue the good, and be alerted to preventing future evil. The last thing I want to talk about is living in the modern world. Much like Elijah in the cave, we can't hide from what we see as wrong in the world. There will always be good and evil in the world, but faith in good can help us to move forward into the unknown. Looking at the world, we can feel a lot of anger, fear, and other emotions that make us want to run and hide. But instead of doing so, we can allow those emotions to turn into a catalyst for action and change in this world. Keep in mind that better times will always arrive. And what will endure beyond this time is not just a cycle of cynicism, not fear, not negativity. What will bring about better times and what will always come back around is things like faith, hope, and love. It's important to remember that we are living in the present, that we are our own modern world. And because we live in said modern world, we have the ability to shape it and influence both ourselves and those around us. We shouldn't live in despair, even when negativity is around us. Instead, we should focus on living in the world with faith. Faith that we can influence things, faith in God, faith that we can do something for the better. But with that, some last couple of things before we end this year. Thank you all for being really great students. And thank you for making this year, my first year teaching, such a wonderful one. You all have done excellent in this year, even in the face of extreme circumstances at the very end of the year. You all have done amazing. You should pat yourself on the back, give yourself a round of applause, whatever you would like to do to celebrate. You all have done wonderful. And like I said, thank you for making this year amazing. Amazing for me as a first year teacher. If there's any assignments you'd like to turn in before the end of the year, if there's anything you see that you are missing, or that you may need to contact me about, please do so as soon as possible. My final cutoff is May 22nd. That is Friday, May 22nd, 2020 at 11:59 p.m. One final time. Friday, May 22nd at 11:59 p.m. That is the last day that I am accepting any assignments because I need time to grade them before the ThinkWave system goes down for the year. If I don't have a class with you next year, don't be afraid to come in and say hi. I'd love to see you again. Again, I'd love to catch up with you on what you're doing, what classes you have, what's going on with you. So, like I said, if you don't have a class with me next year, don't be afraid to stop by and say hi. And finally, have a great summer. I hope you get to do so much with this summer, even if it is just us still staying at home due to quarantine nonsense. But with that, I will see you guys hopefully in August. Have a good rest of your summer. Bye-bye.